Hello and thank you for buying Henson's Flying Machine Liberty Raider XL, the first of our larger size RC aircraft. It's coming in at 33 inches and is printed through laser cutting on 7 individual sheets of 3mm balsa. It also comes with a 3D printed radial engine, landing gear, 4 micro servos, the ESC speed controller, and a 2200 kV electric motor. Assembling. First, mark each of the individual sections on the sheet in pencil using the A3 sheet guide and numbering guide. Once you've marked all of these, you can begin assembling them, fitting them into each other according to the instructions. To build this kit, you will require a scalpel or Stanley knife, super glue or balsa cement, pencil, and any 90-degree edge, of which you can use the cut-off edge of one of the balsa sheets. The first parts for assembly are part 1A and 1B, the sides of the fuselage, then moving on to part 2A and 3A, which are the cross formers for the fuselage. First, remove these from the sheet by gently cutting through any of the tabs with a sharp blade. With the tabs easily cut through, the complete section will press out. Any sections inside of the sections with other sections in, keep to one side for use later in build. With the relevant parts removed from the sheets, lay down part 1A. You'll need to begin part 3A and part 6A. Part 3A fits into 2 slabs here just in front of the cockpit curvature. Just dry fit that in place into the tab slots, like so. Make sure it's down flush. And then part 6A fits just full of that into this little slot, like so. Now, using any 90-degree edge, just make sure that part 6A is fitting down flush and at 90 degrees to 1A, the fuselage, and then glue along the bottom edge, like so. Again, making sure that it is down into that tab. Then leaning part 3A forward, create a contact line across the back, using that to ensure 90 degrees again. Just double check it with a secondary part. And then glue 3A to 6A. Like so. The next part to fit is part 2A, which fits into the forward tab slot here. Just dry fit that into place like so. Now, with this one, you may need to very slightly trim underneath of these tabs here. Just check that they fit down flush. As you can see here, 2A is ever so slightly raised, so I'm going to trim away just the very bottom of that tab, like so. I'll repeat the process on the other side. I'm just taking about 1 millimeter off the bottom, and then dry fit that. Check that you're happy with the fitment, and it is sat up against 6A and into the slot there. Check the alignment, and then glue into the tabs here and along where it meets 6A. Like so. Allow that to dry for a minute before moving on. The next part to fit is part 4A, which goes just forward here and fits down into that slot, like so. Now, you'll need your 90° again, just to check the shape of it, and align it in line with part 6A, like so. Just triple check it, and glue along this edge here and along the bottom. Always dry fit multiple times just to make sure the pieces are where they should be and where you'd like them. So, allow that to dry for a minute. The next part to fit is part 5A, which fits into the bottom of 4A. Now, in some cases, the tab holes will be slightly snug. If this is the case, just using a nail file, sandpaper, or the edge of your craft knife, just sand away the edge of the piece using either of these methods. Remember not to take off too much, as you want a nice snug fit, and then press it into the tab, like so. Now, this piece should sit up flush underneath, connecting here to give strength to the front of the wing support, and underneath this part. Now glue it firmly to the section, along the edges, and to the original side of the fuselage. Feel free to use plenty of glue and to get as good a seal as possible. Allow that to dry before moving on. The next step in building the fuselage is part 1B. Now, if you've put the sections together correctly, these should slot straight over the tabs, pushing down, starting at the back, and then slotting into place, and just flex that around a little bit until you're happy it's fitted perfectly in place. Now, begin by gluing into the tab holes. And make sure that the lower sections of the fuselage are pushed down firmly into place, and then glued into place. Let everything firm up before you move on. Then turn the model over and, working underneath, just make sure that all of these butt joints here have a seam of glue the entire way along, just to add a lot more strength into the actual build. And then again, on the inside, reinforce all of these seams. All of the wood joints. This is on the inside of the aircraft, so it's alright to get a little messy with the glue. And there you'll feel that's quite a robust section of the aircraft now. Next piece to fit is part 7A, which is the cowling base. This slots into the tabs on the very nacelle of the aircraft and just presses exactly into place. You may need to pull the fuselage sides apart slightly, but that will form quite a solid fit. And then glue the entire seam on the inside on both sides, and then also into the tabs on the outer frame. Like so. That builds up the box. It's going to hold the motor controller, speed controller, the LiPo battery, and of course your receiver. The next part to fit is part 8A, which is this shape. It fits underneath the fuselage against the little firewall here. Push it down into place and just have it sit flush there. It's going to form a receiver for the underneath here, and you're going to want to just glue behind the piece, slot it into place firmly, and then just run glue along the front edge. So, if you look closely at that, you'll see that the pieces that form across here will sit on top of it, leaving this strong enough to support the wing spar. The next section, part 9A, begins the curvature of the tail, and that just dry fit here into the rear of the fuselage. And if necessary, just slightly trim using your sharp knife the lower tabs. Like so. Again, I'm just taking off half a millimeter of balsa just to make it fit flush. And I'm going to re-dry fit that into the two tabs, like so. Fits perfectly now. On both sides. There we are. And now I'm going to curve the tail ever so slightly by holding two tail sections together and then just pinching it like so, making sure they're lined and holding the fuselage in place. Once I'm happy with that, glue all the way along the inside edge here, making sure that it's a very strong seal, and that piece is fully within the tabs. Just hold that until it is dry. For part 10A, fits into the rear section of the fuselage into these two slots here, like so. However, as the fuselage is beginning to curve more, we are going to need to sand away some of the wood just to get a nice snug fit. So on one side of it, just using your nail file or sanding paper, just sand down the tabs just in gradual steps. Keep dry fitting these to make sure you haven't taken away too much. You want a nice snug fit. Press them into place, both sides. Be very careful not to crack the balsa as you are bending at the same time. And there you are. Supporting it, pressing it together until you have that firm fit like so. Now just compare the tail section here to make sure that the curvature is right, and that the alignment is something you're happy with, and glue part 10A in place all the way along the seam. Nice strong bond here. And also into the external tab slots, top and bottom. Like so, allow that to set before moving on to building the tail section. To To begin assembling the tail section, you'll need part 12A, 13A, B, 15A, and 16A. Begin by slotting 12A into the upper section of this cutout tab here. Now just very carefully slot that through here. Again, if you do need to do any sanding or anything, now's the time to do it. Make sure it sits down flush there and as high as possible. But be careful, of course, not to break it. Now leave that sat in, just dry at the moment, and then slot in part 16A underneath this section, like so, into the lower part of the tab, and slide it back as far as possible. Now, be very careful not to break it at this point. Lay it flat on the table and then just ease it backwards until you're happy with it. Now we can trial fit that into the fuselage like so. We can see exactly where the fuselage sides are going to fit. There. Now, parts 13A and B fit very simply underneath, like so, in line with this section here, and butting up to the underside of 16A. Now, just glue these along the edges, and into the centre hole there. 13B forming the same place on the opposite side. Of course, going along like so, and in there and along the tail skid. Gives you an idea of how the tail fits together. Now, just for strength, make sure that 16A glued all the way along to the bottom. And then also on the top. Now, if you do want to check for a 90-degree edge, just check it underneath to make sure that the tail plane is sitting completely flat, like so. There we go. Now, this fits into the rear of the plane, like so, with the two tail sections pinching together, and the whole assembly sitting flush like so until being glued in place. You can see the alignment there. And also on top, like so. Make sure that you check from top and bottom to make sure that the alignment is correct. You can also look down the length of the fuselage, making sure that these notches in the top are all aligned. The next parts to fit are parts 17A and B, which are the front formers. These slot into the tabs just before the XL, and you may need to slightly prise the wood apart, just push them there flush. Make sure that you have a nice fitting, and then glue where the sections go into the tabs. 17B fits underneath the corresponding tab like so. Just angle it in, maybe a little bit tight, and then adjust it to fit all the way down into the tabs like so, and glue everywhere the wood meets, and into the tab. So, part 18A fits the rear of the cockpit and is angled slightly backwards. Slide that into the two angle tabs just behind the cockpit like so. You may need to slightly ease the wood apart in order to get a nice fit. Be very careful not to crack the wood. If you want to, you can slightly sand away. Once it's in place, glue it into the tabs, like so. Make sure that it's sitting at a nice angle and in line with the stringer holes. To start finishing off the engine cowling or nose, start with part 20A, putting parts B and C aside. Now, this section here has been semi-cut. The reason for this being is this is the hatch cover that will allow you access into your electronics, your battery cover, your ESC and your receiver. Now, we prefer to have this as a hatch, so we're going to cut it through all the uncut sections here, very smoothly and carefully, getting a nice finish. Now when it comes to covering, you're going to want to sand all of these edges here, just to make sure that a little bit of covering you put on doesn't make the area too tight. Again, make sure you've got a very sharp blade. If you do need to change blades, go ahead. There we go. Just going to press out that section now. Double trim from the inside. And then finish it off with my little sanding stick. You can of course have this entire section removable if you want to, but everything should be accessible through this hatch quite simply. Nice and smooth. That hatch will form there. Now, for the front of it, if you are using this as a movable hatch, you can make it removable. Simply use a little off-cut balsa that is thinner. You want about 1 centimetre depth. It can be fairly rough. And then that will go onto the front there and form a little peg latch. Glue that underneath that section. You'll see why in a moment. Now, moving on to parts 20 and C. These are the sides of the front, and they fit very simply like so. Over there, with this curved edge towards the rear, and then flat up against the front there. Make sure they don't protrude past the front, and that they are evenly spaced, and then glue it along the inside where it meets these sections. And then repeat that with part 20C. 20C fitted exactly the same way on the opposing side. Glued into place, making sure you don't overlap any at the front. You get a nice angle to the rear. 20B and C in place. 20A now fits with this vented front towards the front. Make sure it's aligned perfectly, flush to the front end, and then with equal spacing down either side. Now to hold this in place, just glue it on these two spots here. Allow it to dry for a moment. Then glue along this front edge here. Now it's important to get a very good bond along this front, as this is going to be the foundation of your motor mounting. Lift it up slightly, some glue underneath, and then seal it and hold it down in place. On the inside here, you will see where it attaches, and then very carefully add in a bit of glue here and glue it carefully. To the front of the cockpit. Now, the inside that we cut out of part 20A fits very simply like so, under here, like that. Now, with your ESC and RX in place and your LiPo in, you're going to want to use a bit of tape here on the front. Alternatively, you can place a hinge in there just to lift it up, and a small little screw or something at the back. But I prefer to do it this way, as it's easily removable. To fit the underside of the nose, mounting A, B and C, these sections are smaller but form the same concept as the top. Parts 19, B and C fit on the sides here, just like so, over the top of this little guide here. Pieces may need to be bent slightly into place. Now, starting at the rear, glue along these formers, rear and middle, and then fit the pieces into place, like so, and the same with 19C. Now, once they're dry, taking the nose section, you want to glue underneath this front here, and then just bend it down until it connects to the front section. The vented section, fit this piece starting from the front by running glue along this section here at the front and the middle section. Space it equally between the two parts and flush with the front, and then hold it in place while the front and middle dry, bending the rear a bit backwards into contact. With that dry, you can now glue along the rear of it here, like so, and then just press it down into contact and wait for it to dry. With the main section of the fuselage already assembled, being pretty solid, lay it aside for now, and we'll begin assembling the separate wing section. Moving on to building the wing section, you're going to need parts 21A and B, the leading edge, 22A and B, the trailing edge, and most importantly 23A, the wing center section. Now, the center section is the first part to build. For this you need 23A, the two wing spars 1 and 2, and wing ribs type 1. Now, wing ribs type 1 fit into these sections here. Now, these are designed to fit very snugly into these cutouts, so you will need to gently sand the bottom of these so that they do slide into place. As you can see, as they come, they don't quite fit. This is so that you can sand them with a little nail file or a bit of sandpaper, just along that tab front there, to get a nice fitment. Make sure you don't take too much off, or they will not fit in square and flush. They do push down quite firmly. Be careful not to crack the balsa, but front and back here. Just take away whatever you need, but again, you do want a very snug fit to give it as much strength as possible in that centre wing. Dry fit all of the pieces. Whatever you do, do not glue them in place at this point. As you can see, the slot is further forward than it is, so the more tapered edge of the wing rib wants to face backwards and the more rounded edge forward. Now, remove all of wing ribs type 1, and you'll need to fit the wing spars in place. Now, these fit first one into the forward tab like so, and then press that down and fit in the second wing rib into the rear tab there. Slot that into the section, pressing it down firmly as possible, and then on the opposite side repeat the same process, lining up the wing spars. They can be moved a little back and forwards at this time, and then press wing ribs down into position like so, continuing with the centre ones. Now, even without glue, that should be a very firm setup. Wing spars 1 and 2 should remain movable at this point. Everything pressed down firmly. Now, what you're going to do is glue only the ribs in place. Don't get any glue onto the wing spars at this point, as we're going to adjust them, putting it together. And glue along the edge here. On both sides, getting a nice firm joint. Again in the middle, avoiding getting glue onto the wing spar. We are going to glue the wing spars in just at a slightly later point. Glue at the front as well, making sure they're down firm. This is a section that's going to take a lot of the strain during flight, so make sure that it is very solid. Like so, with your wing spars able to move. Now, laying that aside to dry fully, we're going to move on to 21A and B. 21A and B fit together like so, with these little jigsaw cutouts in place. Now, just using any straight edge, make sure that they are aligned perfectly, like so, and then glue all the way along that seam, allowing the glue to soak down inside, and same on the outer wing, all the way along the seam. Right, with those in place, there is part 23B and C. Now these are designed to fit exactly like so. If you have a look at the aileron, part 24B, This will give you a guide as to exactly how that little servo cutout is going to fit into the arrangement. So make sure that the servo cutout corresponds to the correct piece. Like so. The reason this is here is your micro servo is going to sit here. The arm will play here above the covering, connecting to the actuator here. Now once that's in place, make sure it's perfectly straight and aligned, and glue along the seam, holding it together. Wait for that to dry before we move it and start fitting the rest. With the first wing side assembled, what we're going to do is lay our little assembled center section against it like so. As you can see, pushing down on the wing spars to make them flush will raise this at an angle. What I'm going to do then is move on to our Type 2 wing spars. I'm going to trial fit that over the 2 spars, pushing it down and then slotting it into the tabs at the front. As you can see, that fits snug up inside there, all the way along, and allows the wing spars to pass through. And what I'm going to do is glue that in place front, both sides, and then at the rear and in the middle. You can see this section is still loose, but it is all in place, and I can adjust the wing spar as needed. I'm going to move on to another Type 2, fitting it over the 2 spar sections and into the tab slats, like so. I'm going to glue it at the front and at the rear. Moving along, keeping these sections easily slotting together. Like so. Now I'm going to partly assemble the other side of the wing before I finally adjust the center spar and put on the rest of the wing ribs. Obviously, when building the opposing wing, you need to make sure that it's a mirror image. Building the wing in this way, with everything laid out, will guarantee that you are managing to do that. Just make sure you have all the pieces laid out, and you can confirm how they're going to fit together before moving on with the second wing. So again, go along these seams. Find the servo mount, drop it into place, close it up flush, making sure that it's flat, and glue along the seams. Let that all dry before we start assembling the process further on the wing. With the Type 2 formers in place now and the spars still mobile, we'll glue all this together in a moment. We need to fit a last Type 2 former just here to the edge of the outer wing spar. Now these need to be slightly modified as they cover the aileron movement. So taking a Type 3 wing rib, lay it over the Type 2 on the front. You can see the curvatures are the same, and then where the Type 3 ends, mark against Type 2 and just trim it flush That will give the correct amount of aileron movement towards the end. Like so. That is a modified Type 2, and we'll need to repeat that for 4 of the Type 2s. So again, sit that over there and just trim away the tail section. Make sure that the front curvatures are the same, and then trim flush. This is where the Type 2 would normally overhang the aileron and would restrict movement. In this case, we'll allow full movement to the ailerons by removing these small tabs. Save those, as they can come in useful later for expanding the ailerons. So there are the modified Type 2s. These are going to fit just here toward the end of the wing spar. We're going to adjust the wing spars a little bit now. As you can see, get the firmness in place. Make sure that the outside wings are butted up firmly to the center point. Slot in the modified Type 2 like so, and if it does have the wing spar passing through it, and remember the wing spar is slightly modified, just allow that to sit there. Now we're going to glue that at the front and back, and also where the wing spar meets. This is the first time we're gluing the wing spars into place. You'll see it just touches there. You want a decent bond on both ends, and turning around you'll fit another modified Type 2 just on the other end, and as you can see it just touches up against the wing spar and glues front and back, and then to the wing spar. Now the next stage, we are going to glue the wings to the center section. Now make sure they're flush lined up on a seam of glue along the inside, front and back, and of course in the middle. Do this on both sides, making sure that you have a nice flush seam and that one section is not higher than the other. With those, we're now going to start gluing the wing spar in place. Starting in the very center, just line the bottom of it with glue, continue the whole way up the wing, where it passes through the wing ribs. Glue that securely in place. Repeat that on both sides. Now, with the rear wing spar done, just repeat the process for the front wing spar and make sure you get all of the joints where it passes through any of the wing ribs. Don't be afraid of using plenty of glue, as this is a very stressed point and will save you some breakages later. Good joints will also prevent warping when you're doing your covering. As you know, when you do cover, when it starts to heat shrink, it can pull your airframe slightly out of joint. So try and avoid this by getting good a seal as possible on this spar. There we are. Now that section being as solid as we can, I'm going to reinforce with a little extra glue along the fronts. As you can see, the design has as many box sections built into it as possible to give it plenty of rigidity. And if you feel any weakness anywhere, just reinforce it with a little bit of glue. Okay, moving on to the outer wing sections. Continuing with the modified Type 2 wing ribs, fit them to the outer edge of the wing, pressing them into the slots, lining them slightly forward, and run a seam of glue along the entire length where it comes into contact with the wingtip, like so. Same on the opposite wingtip. If there is any play, always align towards the front of the wing. These are fairly accurately cut. Now, moving to the Type 3 wing ribs. These slot in, starting this section here, slotting into place and gluing along this edge. Now, align it forward and then get a nice strong bond along here, as your servo is going to fit into this pocket here, so it needs a nice strong section. Move along onto the next section, align towards the front, glue it in place, and then glue along the inside, creating a strong bond for your servo. There is a piece of reinforcement that will go in here in a minute. For now, continue with the wing ribs. With this 3mm balsa, it's very easy to align, quite sturdy, so you've got nice fittings. One wingtip done. Move on and repeat the process exactly on the other wingtip. And it is crucial to really reinforce this box section around the servo mount. Get a very nice bond. There we are. You can see now, without the actual main wing spar in, you've already got a fairly solid wing. Turning it over, you're going to need to, with glue, reinforce all of these seams along here. Just fill them in, nice and strong. And of course you can reinforce the fittings, the spars, and where the ribs connect. Well, now let that set for a few minutes and we'll finish assembling the rest of the wing. The next step is to fit these little servo housings, 25A and B. These very simply fit over the holes in these sections here and give a little bit more height to the servos. Make sure that the inside hole is very well aligned. Go around the outside, just in spots. And then very carefully aligning it, drop it in place and glue around the edges. Now the purpose of this is to give the servo height. So when you're fitting the micro servo included in the kit, drop the servo lead through the hole, and then with the housing fitting forward, slide the wire underneath and just drop the servo in at an angle like so. It can then either be glued in place or with the small screws just attached in, and then as you can see that arm will sit slightly above the covering, like so. So repeat that process on the other side, again dropping it in place, aligning it, and just gluing it in. Now, the wing spars in the kit are balsa. It is recommended though for high-speed flights that you replace this with a hardwood dowel or piece of carbon. You can align this like so, bring it to that outer edge there, up against the wing, and then gluing all of the sections in place flush with that top end. Make sure that you have a nice strong bond here. And if you are replacing it with a hardwood or carbon rod, you can always wrap thread around and bind it into place, just to give it a little extra strength, and that would pass through these holes here and then around the top 3 or 4 times of each spar. Go, and that will produce a nice strong wing. Now, if you want to further reinforce here, there are these holes here. You can place another piece through, a piece of short wire or a piece of hardwood, just to brace across those parts there. I'm going to use a little offcut here. As you can see from having this section, I'm going to cut it out and then dry fit it into place, put in a little bit of an angle underneath just to catch it, match a similar kind of angle here, and then just reinforce across there. That section into place. Now, moving on to the building of the ailerons, part 24A. You will require parts 26, A, B, C, D, E, F, and so on. Now, these are these small triangular shapes distributed throughout the balsa sheets. I'll cut them out and I will show you how they fit in order. They are paired. Building up the ailerons, lay both of them next to each other and mirrored, and just check that you're building them the right way up. So seat them against the wing, check that they're the right way, and then mirror them in front of you like so. With the little ribs of the ailerons, they are 6 different sizes in pairs, so pair them all together so you know which is which, starting with the smallest at the outside edge, simply press that into place, glue it, and then if necessary just gently trim or sand it flush with the A-line. As you go along, just make sure that you're doing the exact same on both sides. Moving up in size, I fit. It should slot perfectly in and upright. So there's a slight variance where you can adjust them backwards and forwards. I always like to adjust forward. You can adjust slightly further back. I think forward helps when you're actually covering. And then just glue along the seams into place. Nice and firm. Careful now not to foul the horn holes. There we are. Let those dry and we can look at hinge placement. When attaching the ailerons, you're free to use whatever kind of hinge you like. I prefer to use a small plastic hinge, and I would fit the hinges here and here, gluing to each edge, leaving about a millimetre gap in the control surface, and hinge here on the outside edge. That will give you the least amount of flex. If you want to add in an extra hinge, just to stop any warp acting on the control surface, you should put that one just here, like so. The control horns recommended for this particular aircraft you can make yourself. I recommend using these little L-shaped ones, and they are designed to fit perfectly through these receiving holes here. Pick those up readily at any hobby shop. That will sit like so, and then just have a little bit of glue in place. The servo will fit through this gap here, sit in like so, and then once you've covered, the arm will go backwards and give you a large amount of control surface movement, like so. Now, in order to create the hinge, we've included a piece of piano wire which can simply be bent into a Z shape on one end, measured to exactly the correct size, and then bent again into a Z. Now, to fit this control, remove the small screw in the top of the servo, remove the servo arm, fit it first through the horn, then the arm, place the arm back in place and screw it back down. Laying the wing to one side for now, it's time to finish the details on the fuselage. Finishing off the fuselage is a matter of detail. We have parts 25 A and B, 26 A and B, and 27 A and B. These build up the profiles on the side of the aircraft. You don't necessarily have to use them if you want a boxy shape, but the look of them is quite good. So these are going to fit like so, straight into that top section there. Now, laying the aircraft on the side, 25A simply slots in there and pushes up against that top, like so. Glue along edge. (26A) is exactly the same on the bottom, pushing down against the floor, glue on the leading edge, and then underneath, just where it makes contact, like so. 27A is a slightly different design. This fits like so with the cutout sections in place. Position it in line with the upper part of here and this cutout in place, and then make sure that it is straight between the two pieces, equidistant and fitting flush. Hold it in place, glue along where it connects, front and back, anywhere the wood touches. Nice strong bond. And with that in place, glue it solid, turn the model over, and then continue exactly the same on the opposite side. There we go. Create A and B rear sections of this decoration here. Now these fit into this second to last oblong cutout. Now you want to align these carefully together, so just using a bit of an offcut, get them straight. There is a little bridging part that goes between, and then once you're happy, hold it in place, glue front and back, nice little seam in there. Repeat process on the other side. Glue it in place, check it's where you actually want it. While that's drying, you could of course fit the instrument panel, which is part 31A. An instrument panel can be put in at an angle if you want. You can of course put decals behind it, you can fit it flush like so, or slightly angled forward. It's entirely up to you. It can also be an idea to leave it off until almost the completion of the model to give you more access to the interior, and it looks good with a little bit of black paint on it. Parts 30A and B are servo mounts. Now these are designed to be cut and adjusted how you need them. The servo mounts fit over here like so, with the servos passing through the hole. First put the connector through, then angle the servo in like so. Now you can of course cut away part of this to adjust the angle that the servo is going to sit in. If you want the servo to be straight in line with the aircraft, then trim away this section here so that it sits inside at an angle raised here. I'm going to put it in straight as it is, so I'm going to align that straight over the top of there, like so, and then I'm going to glue just around that outside edge. It'll give you a little more strength around the servo mounting. Same on the opposite side. And just to demonstrate on this side, I will trim this one. I'm going to cut this section out and then glue it aligned around the hole. Just like so, and you'll see when I put the servo in, it'll change the angle in which it actually sits. So it will sit like so. There we go. The stringers here have two shorter parts. These are going to make up little side excesses here, which are going to fit like so. So what you need to do is, first of all, glue along this front edge here where it sits into this notch area. Glue that in place, flat up and following into the line. So dry, and then just bend it backwards in line here, and marking it, simply trim it to be exactly right to fit down. Into that section there. Right. Glue it in place and bend it, hold it, and then when you're happy with it, just very gently sand away that rough edge there to get it to fit flush, like so. Repeat the process on the opposite side with the other stringer, and then going back to your stringers, select 3 of the longer ones, first one of which fits into the top of the fuselage like so. And if you notice in the tail section here, there is a very small notch. Now that can fit like so and be pushed down, or it can be trimmed slightly further back, like so, and the stringer will fit pretty much flush up against this section here. So glue that in place at the back, and glue it on top of the fuselage profiles. The next stringer fits like so into that small notch there and into the notches all the way along. Try and angle it so that it sits with the top edge flat. You can always sand it back as well if you wanted to. And then glue it in place. Now, when these are all glued in place, just laying your blade flat against the rear of the cockpit, just saw away the excess very gently. Any rough edges, of course, you can sand off. Make sure to use a sharp blade and then just nice and flush. Like so. As you can see now, the contours of the aircraft are coming together. Continuing on with the stringers on the top of the fuselage. Dry fit in the very last one. Putting it up against 12A in the tail. And again, begin gluing in the very back. And into the top wall of the fuselage formers. Like so, and then using a sharp blade, perfectly aligned to the rear of the cockpit. Slide through, trim it away, and if necessary you can also file these flush. You can paint the surface or cover it, whichever way you want to go with the model. The next part of detailed build is the machine gun, which also serves as a hatch cover and handle. This is made of 32A and B detailed sides and 33A, the main section of the machine gun. Dry fit the detailed sides like so, making sure the little barrel protrudes and that the top and bottom are flush, and then do underneath and place appropriately. You'll see that the stock does protrude slightly beyond the side profile. Repeat on the other side. Like so. It comes quite a chunky gun, very squared, but the best thing you can do is, using a file or some sanding paper, just sand away the squared edges and round the entire barrel off, give you a great drilled out, riveted machine gun shape. Now you can leave this fairly square or take as much as you want off, entirely up to final build. The more rounded, the more realistic it actually looks. What I like to do with this once it's finished is paint the whole thing black and then just dry brush it with a little bit of silver paint, almost dry, just to bring out some of the details, make it look a bit more realistic. I'm also going to sand just under that edge there, being careful not to nick the supports, but again rounding out the sides of that barrel. Trying to get both sides as accurate as possible. And I'm only going to go that far, but you can round further and further until you've got a perfectly smooth round barrel. I'm not going to go to that extreme. Then dry fit the machine gun into the two holes on the top. As you'll see, the holes are slightly further apart than the machine gun itself. This is so that the machine gun can be angled forward or further backwards like so. If you want it to sit flush, simply take your blade and just trim away part of the inside on either the front or rear of the machine gun mounting, and settle it down into the two holes. I'm going to trim a little off the front and a little off the back, just to give it that very secure fit. I'm not going all the way down because I want it to be slightly proud. As you can see, that then fits like so. It makes more sense to cover this before you finally glue the handle in place, but I'm going to glue it just a little touch of glue for now, just to hold it in location and demonstrate how the hatch is meant to work. So, glued in place like so. Obviously you'll have your tape or your fastener on the front, and then machine gun serves just a very simple handle to pull it away. Now, when flying the actual aircraft, you will need to make sure that this front end is secured down, otherwise the air will push against the gun and pull it back and away. The hatch also allows you all the access into your ESC, your receiver, your motor wiring here, and of course your LiPo battery. Now, as you progress along with the build, before covering, you may want to sand back all of these sharpened edges here, but that is entirely up to you. I'm going to leave it in its raw condition. And of course you can sand back these if you're going to paint it. If you're going to cover it, it's not so important. And of course along these back edges like so. Now, the cockpit detail plate piece can have backing on it or be fitted in like so. I am now going to fit it in vertically in place. This is a demonstration with a touch screw to hold it in situ. Pushing the top, I'm going to give it a very, very slight angle. The next part to do is to fit the rubber retainers on the bottom. These are going to hold the wing in place, and using the bamboo stick provided, simply gauge the width of the aircraft. You're going to need about ½ an inch either side as extra, and trim off 2 sections which are basically the fuselage width plus an inch. These protrude through the sides of the fuselage and just hold the rubber band which you're going to stretch over to hold the wings in place. And of course sand the ends down, you don't want any rough surfaces. And then the holes here on the bottom of the fuselage, just slide bamboo skewer through, leaving the same amount, ½ an inch exposed on both sides, and then glue on the inside where it passes through the main fuselage. Repeat that forward here, just in front of the wing section, and slide through, again not the same amount of exposed, and glue front and inside. Those will hold the rubber bands, which will loop front to back in an X shape or sideways, however you prefer. The next part to fit is 16B, the tail flaps. Now these will fit like so, directly onto the back. You can see there how they'll fit. Now it's always a nice idea to sand away to more of a point where the two control surfaces meet. Obviously, if you're using hinges with a round barrel in the middle, there will be about a millimetre gap, so that's not so necessary. Decide which side you're going to have the servo for the vertical control on. This is the servo horn fitting, which will take servo horn like so, clipped into place. Now, obviously, flipping it over, you can have the control servo either on the right side or on the left side. So choose which way you're going to do it before you go any further. And then part 16C is simply a brace for the tail unit. Just glue along the seam here, holding it in place, making sure that the front is in line, and especially in the center here, like so. You can then sand away this to an almost rounded edge so that it doesn't interfere with any of the control surfaces while in movement. And the only purpose of this is to keep both parts together and to add strength to it. You want 16C, the lower spar, on the bottom of wherever you're fitting it, so that it doesn't foul this top section. Obviously, if you were to have it on the top, it would come into contact with the rubber surface there. So either sand it very much down or have it fitted underneath like so. Now your hinge mountings are probably better placed on top for this one, about halfway along the sides of the tail. Now if you're having just two, that's fine, but you want to make one close to the servo horn here. So a nice idea is have 1, 2, 3, or of course 2 on each side is preferable. You can also use a long fabric hinge or a plastic hinge if you choose. But we'll assume that that's in place, and we will look at the tail upright next. With the tail horizontal fitted in place, you can fit the tail vertical part 15B. Obviously, this hole in the rear of the tail plane here has been left to give clearance to the spar of the tail surface. So when fitting 15B, make sure that 16B is already in situ and anchored exactly where you want it. Leave a small gap in the tail plane. You can of course sand these parts flush just to give you a little more flexible movement, or use a slightly separated hinge which will move the tail back by around 1 millimeter. In the bottom here is place for the servo horn fitment. Now you want this on the opposite side to wherever your tail horizontal control is positioned. So in this case, I position it to the right. You have to cover the model with your shrink film before placing the servo horns in, but you can of course get the hinges in place and ready to settle together. The wing assembly fits underneath the fuselage like so into the slots that can be seen, and we will now place a rubber band on just to demonstrate fitment correctly. Turning the model upside down, we'll have a look at rubber band fitting placement. As standard, 2 rubber bands do come in the kit, but feel free to use your own rubbers, whatever you feel comfortable with. These simply slot over here like so. Be very careful putting them on, especially when the airplane is not covered. The balsa is fragile until you've sealed it. Now you can use 1 single rubber band, or 2. You want to cross over the wings and get a very firm fix on it like so. And then you'll see the airframe is complete. Have the ailerons ready to be hinged in place, the tail surface ready to go in, the rudder, the top for your battery location. Now the 3D printed motor mount. This is our 3D printed motor mount. This is one of the standard motors come with the kit. If you see into motor mount there is a hole in the bottom for the wires to go through. Push your wires through there, one at a time, two at a time, and then allow your motor to drop into. You'll be able to see through there the alignment of the screw holes. Just turn your motor until you get one of the screw holes in location. In the motor bag are the screws, which we will fit now and adjust the motor location. The screws for the motor mount go directly through the smaller holes on the back of the motor, and once you have one aligned, get a decent purchase for it, then screw one in loosely, not all the way, and then just adjust the positioning of the motor by turning it slightly so you have it fitting the way you want it, and drop in the remaining screws in order to fix it in place. So, and then tighten up all 4 screws, which would hold the motor securely in place. With the motor in place, you want to attach your speed controller like so. Pass the cables and the speed controller through the hole in the front of the aircraft, and then align the nacelle like so, and either epoxy, glue, or even double-sided sticky tape to the engine mount here. Included in the kit is double-sided Velcro to mount your LiPo just here, just forward of the main wing spar for balance. You can adjust that using the Velcro, and then your receiver just here, just forward of the cockpit. I like to leave it facing backwards so that you can adjust the servo attachments. With the main airframe assembled, you can begin fitting all of the electronics, the servos, the servo extenders, the control horns, the ESC motor LiPo hatches, then onto the wing covering, cover the body, and use the full colour stickers included. Of course, you can cover any colour you like, my favourite of course being yellow, and finishing off the model like so. Thank you for buying Henson's flying machines. We hope you enjoy this Liberty Raider XL RC. Thank you for watching.